In the third year of King Huizong's reign, the royal court is bustling with excitement for the queen's induction ceremony. After Crown Prince Li Qian ascends the throne and secures his power, the task of selecting a new queen becomes a priority. Among the candidates, one woman stands out, the only daughter of Hong Ik-hyun, the king's prime minister. Her skills in embroidery and calligraphy are widely admired, but it is her intellect and education that truly set her apart. She is known for her ability to engage in scholarly discussions on par with men, something rare and impressive. Her beauty, grace, and intelligence make her the obvious choice, and the kingdom celebrates her appointment with joy and admiration. It seems as though everything is falling into place, and the realm has found its perfect queen. Yet, on the night of her induction, she remains unaware of a hidden issue within herself, one that will soon rise to the surface and challenge her in ways she never anticipated. 3 years later, during the 6th year of King Huizong's reign, life in the palace has become more settled, though rumors continue to swell. Hong Jiwen, the queen's brother, visits her, as he often does. He starts with a friendly question about her well-being, and the queen responds politely, saying she has been fine. However, he soon shifts the conversation to something more serious, rumors of a court lady who has caught the king's attention. He's heard whispers of the king's growing favor toward this woman, and he expresses concern over the situation. The queen listens carefully, acknowledging the rumors without showing much emotion. Her calm demeanor doesn't falter, even as her brother apologizes for bringing it up, his real concern lying in what might happen if the king's attention turns into something more. He worries about the possibility of the court lady becoming pregnant, wondering aloud about her background, education, and standing. He questions how such a woman, with seemingly nothing in common with the queen, could hold the king's favor. The queen responds thoughtfully, repeating advice from their father about a woman's worth not being tied to her skills or education, trying to ease her brother's worries. Despite the tension of the conversation, she stays composed, knowing there's little she can do at the moment. Her brother, still troubled, voices his concerns about how this situation might affect her position, but she remains steadfast, understanding that court life is full of uncertainty. She thanks him for his concern and reassures him that, for now, they must wait to see how things unfold, knowing that her role as queen will require her to face whatever challenges may come. He hands her a book, his face serious as he tells her to read it slowly and study it carefully. He promises that it will be helpful and will address the areas where she falls short in her duties. He explains that it will help her fill the gaps that might be keeping her from meeting the king's expectations. He adds that if she has any questions, she should ask the women around her for guidance, as they would know what to do. In the palace, all the women belong to the king, and because of that, they are never touched by any other man for their entire lives. Only the women whom the king chooses are allowed to receive his favor, and no one else can come near them in that way. Her brother then asks her if she needs a teacher. He offers to find one for her immediately, telling her that it's urgent for her to conceive a royal child before the court lady, the one everyone is talking about, becomes pregnant. He insists that he's only trying to help, reminding her of something she once said, that she couldn't do it. He says their father is losing patience, and she must act before he decides to take matters into his own hands. She needs to do this while she still has the time, and her brother believes it's what's best for everyone involved. As he prepares to leave, he tells her to take care of the situation, and to send for him if anything goes wrong. She listens to him, but when he's finished, she responds calmly, saying that while she can study the pictures in the book and follow his advice, she has no real control over whether or not she will have a child. Seo-kyung sighs, frustrated, saying it's becoming serious. Every time, she's scared and it hurts. She's never completed her duty to the king properly, not once. He notices her mumbling and asks what she's saying when he's right next to her. She tells him she's trying to study, and asks him not to touch her like that. Curious, he asks what she's studying. She replies it's for the king's sake, clearly annoyed that he doesn't appreciate her loyalty. He presses again, asking what exactly she's studying. She says she's learning how to keep the realm standing strong. He chuckles and says if it's the realm she's talking about, then he's the one in charge. He teases her, asking if she's implying that he isn't standing up. With a sly smile, she responds that before he is a king, he's a man, isn't he? And if he rises, doesn't the realm rise too? He laughs, calling her a cheeky wench, wishing the queen had half her liveliness. She smirks and asks if he now sees her loyalty. He grins, saying he certainly feels the depth of her service. The queen sits in her room, flipping through the book, confused. She wonders aloud if what she's reading is about feeling pleasure or pain, or if it means she dislikes it altogether. Her maid interrupts to inform her that the king will be visiting her chambers tonight and advises her to prepare. The maid tries to reassure her, saying that she's beautiful and everything will go well. Later, in her chambers, the king arrives and asks what she's doing. He looks at her and asks why she hasn't started taking off her clothes yet. Nervous, she says something about the lights, but he cuts her off, telling her not to make him repeat himself. She reluctantly undresses, and they begin to kiss. As things progress, the queen suddenly complains that it hurts. The king, now furious, demands to know why it's always like this. He asks if it's really that hard for her to endure. She quickly apologizes, saying she can bear it, trying to calm him down. In response, he pins her down and challenges her, saying they'll see if she can truly endure this. She cries out, calling him my lord, but he eventually stops and leaves her to go to sleep. Left alone, the queen feels devastated, asking herself how it can be this terrible every time. She mutters that once again, she couldn't serve him fully, as expected. Determined, she decides she must study the book more carefully, and even thinks she might need to find a teacher to help her understand the erotic arts. The queen takes a sip from her cup and frowns, saying the drink is bitter. She mutters that she must be able to conceive this time. The maid beside her offers something else and tells her to wash away the bitterness with it. The queen thanks her. Then, noticing another maid's gloomy expression, the queen asks what's wrong. She tells the maid it's all right, and that she should speak freely. The maid hesitates, but finally explains that there's a maid at court she's known since they both entered the palace. Her name is Park Seo-kyung. Another woman in the room interrupts angrily, scolding the maid for speaking nonsense and disturbing the queen's peace. The queen calmly reminds them that she asked for the truth, and again asks what has happened to the maid's friend. The maid explains that Seo-kyung called her barren, and when she tried to correct her, Seo-kyung became violent. She adds that Seo-kyung is even more savage than the queen had heard. She wonders aloud why the king would choose such a woman. The queen sighs, saying that this is all due to her own shortcomings. She mentions a maid who recently left her service to care for her sick parents, and how that position is now open. Someone suggests that Seo-kyung may take the position, but the queen quickly dismisses the idea, saying no matter how wild Seo-kyung may be, she wouldn't be able to easily provoke a maid in the queen's palace. The maid tells the queen that she has her eternal gratitude, and the queen nods, appreciating her support. She realizes she needs to send a letter to her brother right away. She decides to prepare the materials for the letter immediately, because she knows she can't afford to delay any longer. As she thinks to herself, she worries about the other woman conceiving before her. The queen believes that could cause serious trouble, maybe even bloodshed, which scares her. Later, the queen looks at the king and says it feels unfair that he always wins and never gives her a chance to succeed. The king laughs lightly and suggests that she should try harder. He says that a true man would never lose on purpose when he knows he can win. The queen frowns, feeling frustrated. She tells him that she has nothing more to take off, calling him too cruel. The king, with a teasing smile, asks her what she means when she says she has nothing left. He points out that she is still wearing her clothes. He jokes that if she loses one more time, she will end up stark naked, which makes her blush. Meanwhile, Jiwon is making his way to his friend's house. He knows he often gets confused and takes the wrong turns, but he finally reaches his friend's place. He stands at the door and knocks, calling out to see if his friend is home. He shouts, "Hey, it's me, Jiwon," hoping his friend will hear him and come to the door. When Jiwon arrives at his friend's house, his friend jokingly complains that Jiwon has dragged his heavy feet all the way there. He wonders what he would have done if Jiwon wasn't at home. Jiwon admits that he does know his footsteps sound heavy, but he explains that each step he takes is made with sincerity. He then tells his friend that he needs to talk about his erotic art book, saying that there isn't anyone in the capital who hasn't seen it. He adds that with his friend's skill, that's to be expected. His friend observes that judging by how Jiwon's lips are flapping, he has come to ask him for something unpleasant. Jiwon thinks to himself that his friend must be really quick to catch on. His friend insists that he knows whatever it is has to do with art. Jiwon decides there's no point in beating around the bush anymore. He explains that he needs his friend to become his sister's tutor. The next day, the queen asks her maid if she has heard anything from the other maid. The maid replies that she hasn't heard anything yet, but since she often serves His Majesty, there's always a chance she might find out something soon. As the queen studies the book, she sighs and says that no matter how many times she looks at it, it only appears to her like a boiled chicken. She wonders what she should do about it. She thinks that if she does it well, it won't hurt, but instead, it will give her pleasure. However, she worries that trying to take something large and heavy into a small, tight space will obviously hurt. She asks herself how it looks on the inside, and if it is deep enough to accommodate His Majesty's entire manhood. For a moment, she feels as if he has touched her in a certain way. Suddenly, the maid calls out to her, saying there's an urgent visitor waiting. The queen replies that they may have to wait a moment while she gathers her thoughts. The man steps into the room and greets the queen with a warm smile. He says he is here because he wants to help his dear friend, who he considers like a brother. He apologizes for interrupting her busy day, and suggests that they should find a different way to meet in the future. The queen looks at him, curious about what he means. He lifts the curtain a little so she can see his face clearly and explains that he is here to teach her something important. The queen raises an eyebrow and asks what he is talking about. He tells her that this lesson is not just about the distance between a man and a woman, but about how close they can actually be to each other. He smiles, hinting that this will be an interesting and unique experience for her. The queen thinks to herself that she expected someone more carefree since he creates erotic paintings, but instead, he seems just as particular as her brother or even the king. He notices her staring and asks if she sees something on his face. She reminds him that there are strict rules, and he needs to lower the curtains. He agrees to do what she wishes and asks if they should start now. He says they will begin with the principles of yin and yang, but the queen suggests starting somewhere else. She shows him a picture to discuss, but he insists that he, as the teacher, will decide what they learn first. The queen responds that she has heard it's wise to prepare in advance. She acknowledges his enthusiasm, but reminds him that this isn't the place for rushing things. He replies that a man looking for a needle at the bottom of a well would need to be more patient. The queen argues that he can say whatever he wants about her, but he should teach her the lesson first. She admits that it's a bit uncomfortable to ask this of him, but she still does. She explains that this is the position the king wants, and he replies that it is unreasonable to expect a woman who hasn't even mastered the basics of intimacy to take on such a role. He says that a man who demands that shows no consideration for her at all. The queen says she needs to learn no matter what. There's really no other choice for her. She thinks to herself that all she has felt is pain. She had hoped it would get better like everyone told her, and she thought she would start to enjoy it. But it still hurts the same, no matter how many times it happens. All the king does is scold her and tell her that she lies there like a plank of wood. She wonders what she can do to make sure His Majesty enjoys it. The teacher tells her that he understands her struggle. He explains that he is not a gentle teacher, and that she will need to work hard to keep up. She promises that she will work hard so she won't fall behind. He tells her to look at the woman's back in the book. She lowers her back like a cat and raises her behind to show her hidden areas. A man can't help but be attracted when he sees something he usually can't. By revealing this secret spot, it will be hard for him to resist. When a man can no longer hold back and approaches her, all she needs to do is welcome him. In his mind, the teacher thinks that she shows the manner of a model student, but he feels there is no need to write down the part about the cat. He wonders if she is sillier than he expected, or if she is just adorable. He asks her if she understands what he means by welcoming him, and she replies, "Greet him and welcome." He tells her that this is indeed the most important part. He reminds her that to rise to the position of the Prime Minister's daughter, she has worked very hard, so she needs to keep that in mind. The teacher asks if he should ensure she has everything she needs. He thinks to himself that with all her qualities, it's surprising she is treated this way based only on her performance in bed. He decides to give her an assignment, saying that no task can be completed without proper preparation. For a woman to be able to welcome a man properly, she must be aroused. He explains that a woman's intimate area is like a flower, with a bud on top. This bud must be touched gently first. After that, he says they can move on to the larger petals, reaching for the smaller ones. She wonders if that is how she felt earlier. He tells her that her first assignment is to prepare her body to be receptive to a man. He explains that this means she should help herself every day at the same hour until their next lesson. He hands her something and instructs her to use it to explore and familiarize herself with her intimate areas. She needs to pay attention to when and where she touches, so she can understand how her body responds. He prepares to leave, and she assures him that she understands his instructions. The queen thinks about how she has a task to do, but the weather isn't helping. It is so cold and rainy outside, and she wonders if the king is staying warm and taking care of his health. Meanwhile, the king says he thought the rain would stop for a little while, but it doesn't seem like it's going to let up anytime soon. One of his guards tells him that it will take a while for the rain to ease up. The king says he has been worried about not getting enough rain, so he should be thankful for this downpour. He thinks his subjects must be relieved as well. The queen talks to herself, realizing she misunderstood the king, because she is scared of the bedchamber. She thinks this is the king's true self, wise and noble. Just as she is about to call for him, she notices another girl nearby. The girl says, "Your Majesty, you are all wet." The king replies, "Am I as wet as you?" The queen thinks to herself that this girl must be the maid everyone talks about, the one who has caught the king's attention. The girl tells the king that she always seems to show him her wet appearance. The king agrees, saying now that she mentions it, he has seen her wet many times before. The girl mentions that since the king often makes her feel a certain way, she thinks that's the only way he notices her. The king replies that he doesn't remember making her feel that way today, but he can see she already is. She adds that he hasn't seen her lower body yet. He smiles and suggests they see if she's telling the truth. She asks if he must be in such a hurry. He implies that she must be lying since she's already feeling this way. She clarifies that seeing him is what caused her reaction, so she isn't lying. As they lean in to kiss, she suddenly gasps in surprise. Unbeknownst to them, the queen is observing them from a distance. The queen thinks that she needs to do something about the king's affair. Once she gets back to her room, she tries to figure out how to make herself feel good, but it just doesn't seem to work this time. It doesn't feel like it did before. She starts to worry and feels stuck, not knowing what the problem is. Just then, the maid calls from outside, saying that her medicine is ready. The queen tells her to come in. When the maid enters, she notices that the queen looks troubled. She asks if things aren't going well. The queen replies that she's a court lady, so how could she possibly discuss something so personal about the relationship between a man and a woman? The maid then asks if the queen has an assignment to do on her own. She mentions that there's a secret method used among the court ladies. It might be just temporary, but quitting is forever. The maid hands the queen a wooden object, and the queen examines it closely. She asks if this is the item that looks like that. The maid nods and explains that since the queen can control the pace, it will really help her with her assignment. The queen feels that her situation isn't good, but she decides to give it a try. The next day, her teacher arrives at the palace. He greets her, asking if she has been well. She replies that she is fine and asks how he is. He observes that she doesn't seem well and inquires if she feels uncomfortable anywhere. She tells him that she thinks things will get better when they start their lessons. He agrees and asks if they can begin right away. However, she admits that it hurts a lot down below, and it's uncomfortable for her to even sit. It seems that the more she practices, the worse it gets instead of getting better. Concerned, he decides that this won't do, and says he will call for a physician. She is surprised and protests, saying she is really fine. But he insists on checking her temperature anyway. After checking, he tells her that she has a slight fever. He asks her why she keeps insisting that she's fine, when he can clearly see that something is wrong. He warns her not to listen to anyone else's advice. He doesn't want any other influence on his teachings, and says she must only follow his lessons from now on. She apologizes, explaining that she felt lost and decided to seek help. He tells her to watch what he is drawing carefully. He explains that before she explores deeper feelings, she must gently stimulate the slightly exposed area first. He asks her to give him her hand so he can show her something. With a teasing smile, he says he would be much more suitable for her than the wooden object she has. He reminds her not to seek out silly advice for the tasks he assigns her. When discussing flowers, he explains that they need to be handled gently. She nods, acknowledging that she remembers. He instructs her to adjust her position slightly. Then, he guides her hands, telling her to be gentle and careful as they go through the lesson together. She asks if she is doing it correctly, and he encourages her to try a bit harder. He places his hand over hers, guiding her as he explains how to be more effective. She lets out a gasp, reacting so intensely to something so small, and he notices right away. He tells her that her body can't hide anything from him, he can see it in the way her toes curl. He's certain she's already warmed up to him, and he can tell it's enough to tempt anyone. He says it like he's talking about someone else, but really, he's the one who's already drawn in. He asks if she understands what he wants from her now. She nods, apologizing, and he points out how flushed she's become, as pink as a sunset. She's so shy, yet eager to learn, and he wonders if he should praise her for it. Then, he suddenly asks her if she's ever had trouble eating peaches, or if she's allergic to the fuzzy skin. She says no, laughing a little, adding that she actually loves peaches when they are in season. She asks him what he's even planning to do with the peaches if they are not peeled. She thinks to herself how hard it is to figure him out. What is he doing, peeling the skin off with his mouth? She watches him closely, intrigued, but lost in thought. He notices her staring and asks if she's paying attention to what he just did. Embarrassed, she quickly apologizes, explaining that she hadn't even realized she was staring. He tells her she did well, just like last time, and that the next thing he'll ask of her will be as challenging, or as easy as she makes it. He then gives her an unusual task. He wants her to practice peeling a peach with just her mouth, like he did. She agrees, saying she'll try her best to get it right. He then laughs and tells her not to take it so seriously. She only needs to put in a reasonable effort, and simply follow what he showed her. She nods, saying, "Yes, sir." He looks at her and asks if she truly understands what she's doing. Why is she willing to put herself in difficult situations like this? He tells her that working hard is important, but it's even more urgent for her to start valuing herself. She's taken aback and asks, "Value myself? How am I supposed to do that?" She sighs, adding that the list of things she needs to learn seems to grow every day. Her brother, overhearing, turns to his friend and jokes, asking if she doesn't become more endearing every time he sees her. He goes on to say how lucky his friend is to witness her sweetness and cleverness firsthand. He laughs, saying he shouldn't have spent so much effort over the years praising her to his friend. His friend would have come to realize her charms on his own. Then he asks, with a grin, how she's doing as a student, sure that his impressive little sister must be doing well. But he catches himself and wonders aloud why he even bothers to ask, chuckling that, as her older brother, of course is both curious and concerned about her progress. After all, she lives in the palace now, and it's not as if he can drop by to see her whenever he wants, especially with how strict her lessons have become. Then he turns to his friend, almost teasing, and asks if he really wants to know how she's doing. He wonders why his friend didn't just admit he wasn't interested, instead of ruining a perfectly good conversation. His friend just responds, saying that was his answer, and remarks that the journey she's on is a long one. There's still 9,000 miles ahead, figuratively speaking. Her brother, a bit offended, says, "What? How dare you talk about my sister like she's slow? I can't just sit back and let that slide." His friend chuckles, saying she's quite different from her brother. While her brother is so fiery, she often just looks lost and hesitant. Maybe it would be better if she had more of her brother's spirit, he adds. Her brother scoffs, saying maybe it's the teacher who's the problem. If his friend can't teach her well, then whose fault is that? But before he can finish, his friend cuts him off, saying, "Are you really going to keep causing a scene in my house over this?" He calmly adds that he's doing his best for her, reminding her brother that he hasn't forgotten the debt he owes him. Her brother sighs, saying he didn't ask out of obligation. His friend reassures him that he only meant she has a long road ahead of her, not that there isn't a road at all. He tells her that, just like a beautiful painting that takes time to create, anything truly captivating doesn't happen instantly. He adds that she has a natural charm that will capture anyone's attention, and those who try to resist her will eventually be drawn to her. Even a king wouldn't be able to ignore her. She's focused on peeling the peach with her tongue, trying to do it the way he showed her. "It's working," she says, sounding both pleased and a little surprised. She almost manages it, but admits it's harder than she thought. At least the taste is pleasant, which makes it easier to keep trying. Just then, she hears a sound outside that announces the arrival of the king. She pauses, wondering what he could be doing here at this hour. The king comments on how hot the weather is and asks how she's been feeling lately. She replies that she's well and thanks him for his concern. Then, nervously, she asks if she's done something wrong since he's never come to see her like this before, unannounced. She's anxious just sitting with him, unsure what to expect. But he doesn't seem upset. Instead, he tells her he's come to ask her for a favor. Surprised, she wonders aloud what kind of favor the king could possibly need from her. He reassures her, saying it's nothing grand or unreasonable. As he looks at her, he notices tiny drops of peach juice on her face and asks if she enjoys peaches, adding that he's never seen her looking anything but perfectly composed. He mentions there's a bit of peach skin on her face and can't help but wonder if she's been licking it off with her tongue. Embarrassed, she apologizes for her less than perfect appearance. The king chuckles and tells her not to worry, he'll pretend he never saw it. He jokes that it must be a rare sight, as she's usually so serious and put together. Then, he brings up a palace maid named Seo-kyung from the Park family, explaining that he's actually come to talk about her. Curious but cautious, she asks why he's bringing up this maid. The king reminds her that it's her responsibility, as queen, to grant Seo-kyung the rank of senior lady, so he wouldn't have to intervene. She responds, explaining that there are priorities she must consider as queen. While the people struggle with so little, it feels strange to focus on promoting a maid. She suspects Seo-kyung hopes for more than just the title of senior lady, and hints that this must be very important if the king has come personally on her behalf. She says she just needs him to clarify what exactly he wants her to do. She admits she doesn't fully understand how far his thoughts go regarding this, but she's willing to agree, knowing that she doesn't really have the right to deny his request. Since it's likely to happen anyway, she'll accept it gracefully. Then, almost as if testing his reaction, she asks if he'd be satisfied if she granted this maid the rank of concubine. He laughs, saying even she must know that he wouldn't take such a suggestion seriously. She points out that they've been together for years, yet she still doesn't always know what he's thinking. She insists that she wasn't joking and asks if she sounded like she was. The king, still amused, tells her that it would be ridiculous to give such a position to a simple maid just because she's brought him a bit of happiness. The king and the man assisting the maid girl come face to face. The king signals for him to lift his head and reveal himself. Meanwhile, the doctor enters the queen's chambers and greets her. She, flustered, wasn't expecting him so soon. He mentions crossing paths with the king outside, and she starts to worry, admitting she thought she heard something. The doctor jokes about running into bandits, but he quickly brushes it off, saying it was just a joke. Then he inquires about her assignment. She realizes she forgot to send for the peaches, but he comments on the strong peach scent already filling the room, suggesting she put in some effort. He notices her lips look a bit swollen, hinting at her anxiety. As she nervously cleans her brow, he reassures her, recognizing her sincerity, and offers her a reward for her hard work. She's surprised, not expecting any acknowledgement. Later, on a windy day, the main girl stands alone under a red structure, deep in thought. The queen mentions that as he walked, it felt like he already knew the way, moving straight toward the pavilion without hesitation. The doctor, curious, asks what she means. She explains that it made him seem like someone who had lived here for a long time. In a flashback, we see the young king, hand in hand with his mother, who wears a red kimono. The young king reflects on how this place always brings peace to his mind, no matter when he visits. In the present, the doctor tells the queen he was probably drawn to this spot by its calming atmosphere, feeling its peace even from afar. He continues working with his brush on paper, then hands it to her, calling it her reward. He encourages her to draw whatever she wants and to let go of any unkind words or criticisms she has faced. The doctor then thinks to himself that he must have overheard the king speaking loudly, and that the king's words were full of frustration. He reflects on how he often feels drawn back to the same things, over and over, despite all the eyes always watching him, pressuring him to hide his true self. The moments he conceals who he really is just keep piling up, and he worries he's beginning to forget who he is deep down. But at least, in this role, he's certain of one thing, he's her teacher. The queen takes the brush from him and starts painting. After a while, she finishes and hands it to him. He studies her work, then jokes that they should switch roles as teacher and student immediately, since her talent is clear. She smiles, pleased, and says it's comforting to know her teacher recognizes her skill. The queen thanks the doctor wholeheartedly for his thoughtful reward, and he looks at her in surprise. Hidden nearby, Seo watches, feeling bitter, and quickly slips away. Soon after, Seo appears in a green kimono with a flower pin in her hair, catching the attention of nearby servants who whisper that she's wearing a hairpiece even the queen wouldn't dare to wear. They gossip about her ambition, saying she acts like she's aiming for the position of royal consort rather than just a senior lady, but they quickly warn each other to be careful. Seo's temper is known to be vicious. Seo, hearing them, scowls and vows to remember their faces. She thinks about how none of these fools even know the king, but one day she'll make them regret their words. She's determined to reach the top, no matter what it takes. The queen, exhausted, sits on a makeshift throne, while a lady-in-waiting gently warns her that handling so many duties could affect her health. The queen, wiping sweat from her brow, insists it's her responsibility, and is relieved that this particular task is finally over. Just then, a servant enters to announce that Lady Eunuch Jung has arrived. Lady Jung gives the servant a harsh glare as they briefly exchange words, then tells the queen that the king will visit her chambers tonight. She explains that this visit is meant to uphold the queen's status in the palace and to show appreciation for her loyalty, though she adds that his presence will be purely for appearances. So the queen need not worry. Though he doesn't need her tonight, she decides she won't waste this chance. She clenches her hands in her lap, gathering her courage and determination. Later that evening, as the candlelight flickers, she and the king are alone in their chambers. He notices her sitting tensely and asks why she isn't lying down. Nervously, she fidgets, and he sighs, saying he'll lie down first. She thinks to herself that this is her moment, she has to be brave. As he settles in, she moves closer, cups his face gently, and leans in to kiss him. As their lips meet, she worries if she's doing it right, but his gaze reassures her. Still, she wonders if her boldness might upset him. Instead, he draws her closer, kissing her back. They become more intimate, and she silently prays that she'll be enough for him tonight. Determined, she tells herself that only by showing she can change can she hope to win his heart. When they finish, she realizes he didn't turn his back to her. For the first time, he lies on his back beside her. She feels a surge of hope, thinking she might soon bear a prince who resembles him. Despite her aching body, she's content, knowing she fulfilled her duty. Smiling to herself, she looks up, feeling a quiet happiness. Seo speaks out angrily upon learning that the king is with the queen. Her companion explains that it's only for appearances, and that he likely went to maintain the queen's dignity. Privately, the woman thinks about how short-tempered Seo really is. Wanting to be more than a senior lady, Seo is clearly furious, biting her finger and muttering about how he should be with her on such an important day to raise her status. Frustrated, she demands if her companion mentioned seeing the queen with a strange man in the pavilion, being entertained in private. The companion, confused, hesitates, but Seo insists, claiming she saw them staring at each other suspiciously. To herself, Seo seethes over the queen's modest facade while she's with another man in broad daylight, then turning around to act innocent with the king. Seo throws a bag of coins at the woman, who stares, shocked at the amount. Seo dismisses her, ordering her to take it and leave. Alone, Seo opens a drawer and retrieves a carved wooden object. She refuses to lose the king's favor to a woman she sees as stiff and uninteresting. This object is something she specially commissioned to match the king's own tastes, lifelike and meant to attract his interest. She rationalizes that every man has different preferences, and that the king simply needs variety. In her mind, the only reason he seeks another woman is from boredom with what he already has. She inspects the small bottle of a potent, banned substance she acquired, a concoction known to drive men wild with desire. To her, it's worth the risk. She's not about to lose him before she has a chance to conceive a prince. Following meaningless laws won't help her, only action will. Seo decides she'll keep things exciting by showing him new positions, something unfamiliar so he doesn't tire of her. She plans to nibble away at his defenses, bit by bit, trapping him until he's completely captivated. In her mind, even if he's the king, he's still a man, and she's confident she can make him hers. Heavy rains pour down, flooding the land like never before and leaving devastation everywhere. Many villagers cling to their rooftops, trying to stay above water, while some are swept away by the strong currents, with others desperately trying to rescue them. Homes are destroyed, and many lives are lost in the rushing waters. Those who survive soon realize their crops are ruined. Farmers fall to their knees, heartbroken as they see their fields withered and dead, while children cry, knowing hunger is coming. With food shortages spreading, people turn to crime just to survive, and gangs of bandits begin to overrun the provinces. In the morning sunlight, the queen of the land stands in the palace, worried. She says it's a disaster, with more people starving each day, and bandit activity increasing. Lady Eom, at her side, says the damage makes sense given how severe the floods have been. The queen decides to sell some of her possessions to set up a hunger relief center near the medical center. Lady Eom, sweating nervously, warns that the queen's treasury is already nearly empty from providing aid, and if she sells her belongings too, they will have nothing left. But the queen insists that her people are starving, and she won't value her possessions over their needs. Lady Eom thinks to herself about how deeply the queen genuinely cares for her people. The queen speaks thoughtfully, wondering aloud if the king is concerned about the rise in bandits. She believes if they could keep the people fed, there would be less need for banditry, accomplishing two goals at once. She reminds herself that her duty is to quietly support the king, helping him shape the nation as he sees fit. In another part of the palace, Seo eagerly tries to get the king's attention, smiling as she says, "Your Majesty, isn't the weather just beautiful today?" He doesn't respond, lost in thought about the harm the long rains have caused his people. She calls out to him again, but he still doesn't react. Growing frustrated, she huffs, pouting that it's cruel for him to ignore her when all her attention is on him. Amused, he reaches over to play with her hair, chuckling at her little tantrum. She blushes, then teases, asking if he'll grant a request from this cute little tantrum thrower. The king apologizes, saying he was preoccupied and didn't quite catch what she was asking for. Curious, he asks what it is she wants so badly. Seo beams and says that since the rains have stopped, she'd love to go on a pleasure barge. He raises an eyebrow, thinking about the recent floods and the bandits causing trouble. But Seo, undeterred, clasps her hands, putting on an adorable pleading expression, and complains that since becoming a senior lady, there's been no real celebration for her, making her feel so embarrassed and disappointed. He smirks, saying he understands and admits he might have been careless. He tells her they can plan a small celebration. Just then, the queen steps in, cutting him off politely but firmly. She says a pleasure barge isn't appropriate given the current situation, reminding him that their people are struggling due to the floods. The maidens behind her bow respectfully, showing their support for the queen's words. Seo grits her teeth in frustration, frowning as she thinks, what does the queen think she's doing? HMPH, she's only the queen. Does she really believe she can stand up to the king's decisions? How impudent. The king needs to put her in her place. The king turns to the queen and asks if she's trying to give him orders, addressing her by her title. She sighs, then gracefully drops to her knees and bows her head, replying that she would never dare to command him. She only voiced what she believed was already on his mind. He is, after all, the father of their nation, and his people are suffering from the flood's destruction. She suggests that instead of a pleasure barge, a more modest banquet would be suitable. Seo seethes internally, thinking, a banquet. She can't expect me to be satisfied with that. The king should be reprimanding her and reminding her of her place. The king pauses, clears his throat, and tells the queen to ensure everything is prepared. Seo's eyes widen, shocked that he's agreeing with the queen instead of her. She thinks angrily, why is he listening to the queen and not me? A pleasure barge would be the perfect way to show everyone I have his favor. The queen bows, relieved, promising to handle everything with proper decorum and to avoid any excessive displays. Inwardly, she's thankful she can ensure the event is appropriately modest. The king observes both women, his face stern, thinking that this compromise should satisfy both. He tells the queen she may proceed, nodding in approval. The queen bows again, and thanks the king for his decision. Lady Eom quietly thinks to herself that this is becoming a problem. The queen, despite her efforts, could still be a threat to the stability of the nation. Meanwhile, Seo is fuming with anger. Later that evening, she approaches the king, clearly upset. She complains bitterly, asking how he could do this to her. The king calmly explains that he made sure everything would be well prepared, despite her tantrum. His teeth grind in frustration as she continues to sob, insisting that she wanted to go on a pleasure barge, not a banquet. He sighs, clearly tired of her complaining, and tells her that the matter is already decided. There's no need to talk about it any further. He looks away, glancing at a house in the palace grounds, thinking how tiresome it's becoming to comfort her constant whining. Since the queen is showing more interest in him lately, he thinks it might be time to visit her more often. Seo notices his mood shift and nervously calls out to him, but she quickly realizes she's overdone it. She can't let him get tired of her before she gives him a son. Determined, she starts to undress. The king, surprised, asks what she's doing. She winks at him as she moves closer, her thoughts racing with plans to seduce him. She's going to show him pleasures he's never known before. She moves forward, and is powerless to resist. The doctor comments that the weather is nice today, and speaks to Lady Eom, who starts to sweat nervously. He calls out her name to get her attention, and they both peek through the doors of the queen's chamber. The doctor asks if the queen is inside. Lady Eom tells him that the queen is busy preparing for the banquet. The doctor looks confused and asks, "A banquet at a time like this? Has a foreign envoy arrived?" Lady Eom, still nervous, just answers with a simple "well," and breaks a sweat. Inside the room, the queen is focused on her work when she notices the doctor. He sees her and quickly says that it looks like she has caught him. He bows and remarks that she seems busy, and that he heard she's preparing a banquet. The queen laughs awkwardly and agrees, saying that's what's happening. The doctor raises an eyebrow, and asks why a banquet is being held during such hard times. The queen's expression turns a little sad as she responds, saying that, while it's usually proper to avoid such events when the people are struggling, sometimes things like this are unavoidable. She explains that the funds from the banquet can be used to help the people, which will make them feel less resentful of the event. In fact, they might even see it as a blessing. The doctor thinks to himself that he had thought she was only soft-hearted and naive, but now he sees she's actually quite clever. Despite being young and only having been queen for 3 years, she seems to have learned a lot about ruling in a short time. Then the doctor asks her directly, saying that a position like hers must require thinking about these kinds of things, doesn't it? The queen says she is almost finished with her work and they can start their lessons soon, but the doctor interrupts, asking who the banquet is for. She sighs and admits that she hasn't told him yet. The queen explains there's a small issue, and then tells the doctor the whole story. After some time, he says that's why a banquet in her honor has been planned. The doctor thinks to himself that the king suggested an orchestra to cheer up the people who are starving, which he finds completely ridiculous. Then the queen says she shouldn't have said anything. The doctor shakes his head, telling her not to worry. He says it was him who asked first, so she shouldn't be concerned. She says it will be fine as long as she does her part well. If she prepares everything carefully and conducts the event properly, it won't reflect badly on the throne. The doctor then asks if the king plans to let her handle everything herself. He says the ignorant subjects will just praise the king for his generosity, and he will reward her, calling her wise for her efforts. The doctor rests his chin on his hand as he watches her and continues, saying that all her work will go unnoticed, and instead, She should throw a lavish feast, just like she was told to, so the people can resent the king and his woman. The queen replies that she doesn't do this to gain praise. She's doing it because she knows it's her duty and responsibility. The doctor then asks why she insists on doing something that could put her at risk. If the banquet is too modest, she might be criticized. Her role is to support the king and maintain the dignity of the throne. Her duty is to stand in front of the people and embrace them. She doesn't want anything more or less than what is expected of her. He says that she's too easy to understand, Your Majesty. He thinks to himself that she's the perfect mother of the nation and the true spirit of a queen. He can only say that the king is really lucky to have her. He mentions that he's curious to see how that vain woman will react when she shows up, expecting a grand banquet. She replies that it doesn't matter if that girl likes it or not, though she doesn't expect her to. Next, we see the king with Seo. The king asks her what she's done to him. She says she's just served him with all her heart, Your Majesty. He tells her she acts as though she has no shame. She then responds, asking how serving him could be shameful. She thinks to herself that the king chose the queen's banquet over her barge. He says that's enough. She thinks to herself that she doesn't need a wise and practical king. She needs a king who will only listen to her, no matter what. She clicks something on her hairpin, releasing red smoke into the air. She tells him, Your Majesty, they say a woman has two mouths. The king begins to sweat, thinking there's some kind of scent in the air. She thinks to herself that if she can control him however she wants, she doesn't care if he becomes a tyrant. She says that the mouth down here hasn't served him tonight yet. She thinks to herself that she's going to use this aphrodisiac to scatter all of his good sense. As they get intimate, she tells him she wants to have a baby who looks just like him. She begs him to let her conceive his royal child. He tells her fine, and that they'll see if she can actually conceive one. He tells her that the first son born will be named the crown prince. Seo's eyes widen as she thinks that her son could become the crown prince. She then says, Your Majesty. She thinks to herself that if she can become the mother of the future king, everything will be different. They continue to be intimate. A few days later, in the largest wing of the palace, guests are chatting. One guest says, How funny, a banquet to celebrate someone becoming a senior lady. Another guest replies, And during this time, when the people are starving, the queen has a generous heart. She could have held the banquet in one of the smaller annexes instead. The scene shifts to a lavish dinner, with Seo sitting in the middle, but she doesn't look happy at all. Does she really still not understand her place? Seo lowers her head, fuming. The guests continue talking among themselves. One says that it's her first time in this part of the palace, and the view is lovely. Another woman laughs, and the first woman adds that the food is a bit lacking, but it makes sense since they're going through tough times. A third woman says, Hush, don't say such things. The second woman asks, What's she supposed to say then? Seo is fuming, thinking that this prime location comes with barely any food. Just the basics. Is this what the queen plans? To mock her by serving such scant herbs at a feast meant to celebrate the king's affection for her. The queen must think she'll stay quiet, but she won't. Seo grits her teeth and keeps thinking to herself. She won't let the queen get away with this. Meanwhile, in the queen's chambers, she sits with Lady Eom. The queen says to Lady Eom that the banquet is lacking, isn't it? Lady Eom quickly responds, saying that how can the queen worry about something like that? It's more than enough, there's nothing missing. The queen forces a smile and laughs, saying that this is all thanks to His Majesty's generosity in providing her with a decent fund. The queen thinks to herself that she wonders if it was really just mismanagement, or should she call it redistribution? A celebration is still a celebration, even in difficult times. She can enjoy the banquet, and share the joy by using the funds to help the people who are struggling. They must care for the people, as they are the foundation of the country, and must never be forgotten in anything they do. She thinks it was the right decision to make, considering the laws. Suddenly, the queen says, "Where is the maid we sent to observe the banquet and report back on it?" Just then, a maid rushes into the room, tears in her eyes. She screams that there is trouble. Lady Eom asks, "What kind of expression is that on the maid's face? Why does she look so scared that the other ladies can't even do anything?" The queen stands up and heads for the door, and Lady Eom calls out to her, saying, "Your Majesty, you only threw a banquet to celebrate a mere senior lady, and all she had to do was sit quietly and receive the ladies in peace." The queen says that she only invited ladies she felt comfortable speaking with, considering their ranks. Lady Eom then says that she isn't blaming her. It's just that it might be a difficult position for someone with little experience to handle. The queen thinks to herself that she is partially to blame too, because she didn't want to sit there and give her blessings either. The queen hurries to the room, asking if anyone hears anything. She walks in and sees a broken plate and Seo glaring at one of the ladies in waiting, who is kneeling with food all over her. The lady, Park Hyun-ju, the wife of the Minister of Rights, apologizes for her unsightly appearance, saying this insult cannot be fixed with just an apology. Seo asks if she's being threatened. The queen steps in, and the guards announce her presence. The guests whisper among themselves, surprised by the queen's arrival. One wonders what will happen now, and the queen asks why there's arguing at a celebration. She sees Park Hyun-ju on her knees with food on her hair and asks what happened. The lady apologizes, and the queen turns to Seo, demanding an explanation. Seo stammers, but Lady Park interrupts, explaining that she was only praising the queen for setting an example during these tough times. The queen glares at Seo, who wonders why Lady Park said that, claiming she only laughed and celebrated. Seo thinks to herself that Lady Park is known for speaking so well, and her words probably wounded the woman's pride, but she can't let Seo's behavior slide. The queen orders Seo to apologize immediately. The crowd whispers among themselves, saying how shameful this is. But what's really shameful is being covered in food like this. Lady Park is only putting up with it because the queen is here. If it weren't for her, she wouldn't stand for this. She should be thankful this is all that's happened. How was she planning to fix this situation otherwise? Seo clenches her fists, frustrated, thinking that she has to bow and apologize to Lady Park in front of all these arrogant wives. One of the wives whispers that if Seo is acting like this now, how will she behave if she gets pregnant? Seo's mind races with the thought of pregnancy, and suddenly, she collapses to the floor, crying out in pain, saying her stomach hurts. Lady Eom asks what she's doing, pretending to cry like this. Seo explains that her period hasn't come this month, and she thought she might be pregnant. She says her stomach hurts and if anything happens to the king's child, she doesn't know what she'll do. The queen's eyes widen in shock, thinking to herself that Seo might be carrying the king's child. Meanwhile, we see the queen's brother and the doctor together. The doctor remarks how nice it is to see him again. The brother responds, saying what does his friend expect? Does he think it's easy to climb this difficult mountain to get here? The doctor crosses his arms, bored, and comments that he remembers the brother coming around in the middle of summer when he needed something from him. The brother sighs and says that he's not just sitting around, he's been busy. The friend hands the doctor a blue scroll, and says it's a message from the queen. She's not feeling well and asks him to skip his lesson this week. The doctor reads it and comments that she's missed the last 2 lessons. She must be really sick. The brother laughs and says his friend must not have heard the rumors. He says the queen is pregnant, and the doctor's eyes widen in shock. The brother continues, saying their father's face, when he found out was priceless, and he's probably going to visit the palace to scold his sister. He can only imagine how upset she is. The doctor thinks to himself, so that's what happened. He can't even imagine how many tears she must be holding back. He wonders what's making him feel so strange. Seo's companion looks around the room in amazement, saying there's so much stuff. It's worth a lot. Seo could buy a house in the middle of the city twice over with all this. Seo sits on a cushion with her arms crossed and frowns, thinking that maybe it's true. She realizes that it's been 10 days, and the gifts just keep coming. Then someone from the royal palace enters and checks Seo's pulse. He says it might be too early to check, but if her period has stopped and she's feeling sick in the morning, those are clear signs she's pregnant. Since she's been so close to the king, they'll just have to wait and see. Seo sits nervously on the king's lap, thinking to herself that she made all of it up in the heat of the moment out of anger. Seo is in a panic about what to do now. Luckily, her period has started, so she won't have to worry about being pregnant after all. Her friend asks her what she'll do if she isn't actually pregnant. Seo looks at her, confused, and asks what she means. The friend laughs nervously and says that if Seo only thought she was pregnant, it could be a huge problem if she gets caught. Seo gets upset and demands to know if her friend is saying she lied. Before she can argue more, the king walks in and looks at the women, sensing something's wrong. Later, Seo and the king are together, and he expresses concern that she hasn't been eating much. Seo replies that she didn't know how hard it would be to be pregnant, and while she picks up some food with her chopsticks, she asks the king to eat. The king smiles and tells her she should be the one eating, not him. Seo responds that she feels happy just watching him eat. The king chuckles and asks if she isn't acting too dignified. Seo says that she must be dignified if she's going to raise a future prince. At her words, the king seems to grow distant, saying a prince, but then Seo suddenly stands up and starts undressing. The king asks what she's doing, and Seo says she wants to serve him right now. As they get intimate, the king pauses and reminds her that she is with child, and the law says a pregnant woman can't receive anything from a man. Seo thinks to herself that she hates that law. She needs to get his seed, and since he's aroused right now, maybe it will happen. As the air fills with the scent of an aphrodisiac, Seo feels confident. She knows it will make him even more aroused, and she plans to climb onto him and make sure he releases inside her. The king glares at Seo, frustrated with her behavior, and forcefully pushes her away, telling her to stop. Seo looks at him and wonders why he's acting like this. She thinks to herself, no. The king tells her that now that she carries the royal bloodline, she must behave properly and not act so recklessly. Seo can't stop thinking that she needs to get his seed as soon as possible. If things keep going like this, she might never truly get pregnant. As red leaves fall to the ground, we see the queen's teacher, lost in thought. He wonders if he should give up on seeing her, even if it means forcing his way. He had asked to visit her to offer his well wishes and received word that she's feeling better, and that their lessons will continue, which pleased him, but is not sure what exactly it is that is feeling. His attention is suddenly caught by a jewelry seller, who calls out to him, offering to show him beautiful jewels. She holds up a piece against a pillow, saying that there's nothing like a beautiful gem to show his feelings. The teacher thinks to himself, his feelings. He knows that the queen isn't one for fancy decorations. Any adornment she wears would lose its charm next to her strength and the grace of her manners. He wants to give her something she truly needs, something she lacks. As he bends down, he spots a dead white cat. He picks it up and decides that he will take it. The teacher thinks to himself how strange it is, feeling something he can't quite understand. The next day, the queen and her teacher are together. She thanks him for his concern, playing with the cat. She says that she's afraid she's caused him unnecessary worry. He responds that the weather has grown cold, and he only brought her something necessary. Then, he notices that she's become thinner and comments on it. The queen looks down sadly and admits that she still feels like her understanding is lacking. She says that she should only be happy that a child of the king's bloodline has been conceived, and she feels ashamed of herself. The teacher grumbles, saying that of course, she's upset. Why should she be pleased? He adds that the woman the king is with is nothing special, not even pleasing to the eye. The queen laughs and says that the doctor is too considerate. Suddenly, she smiles and says, "Oh, right. I haven't properly thanked you yet. I've been so busy with preparations for the banquet that I only just finished serving His Majesty." The doctor, surprised by her words, stops drinking his tea and looks at her. He places the cup back on its saucer and says, "Well done." But then, he starts thinking to himself, what's happening? I should be praising her for a job well done, but why am I struggling to find the right words? Why does that shy smile make me feel so strange? He wonders what this feeling means. All he knows is that he needs to stop it immediately. The queen calls out to him, pulling him out of his thoughts. He shakes himself back to focus and reminds himself that he promised to keep his walls up, and that's how he has lived up until now. In a flashback, we see the king standing among his subjects, saying that this is their chance for a counterattack. The men respond, "Yes, Your Majesty." They are talking about people who have bad intentions. The king tells them they must act quickly and take advantage of this moment, or they could face problems in the future. But these people have helped him a lot in the past. The king looks at the scroll in his hand, which has a list of names. This is the list they're referring to. He says that he was taught that it's wrong to swallow what is sweet and spit out what is bitter. He promises that he will become a fair and benevolent king for everyone. He acknowledges that he tried to take on too much without the ability to see it through. A man tells the king, "This too shall pass." The doctor thinks to himself that after that moment, he decided to step away from everything. He tells her congratulations, saying nothing can change now. She clenches her hands and responds, thanking him, but saying it was just one night, and not something grand. She looks away, thinking it was just luck that helped her get through it. The doctor asks if she's crying, and though she tries to hide it, she says no. He notices and smiles, commenting that the woman who always holds herself together is now crying in front of him in such an endearing way. She admits that she lied earlier, and that she's anxious and fearful. She wonders what will happen if the other woman has a prince. She believes if that happens, it will lead to bloodshed, and she's ashamed for thinking such things. She stares at the vase of broken flowers, asking if he's hurt in any way. He ignores her question, telling her the king's favor is everything to the other woman. She's startled, but she quickly thinks she would never let something like that happen again. This is her chance. She asks what he means by that, and he tells her he will help her. The law says the king can't embrace her while she's with child, and now he has no outlet for his desires. She must take that opportunity. He tells her that the hardest part, being with the king for the first time, is done. The next time will be easier. The doctor thinks he might regret this, but he advises her to learn from the king's lessons with her eyes and body, to make him hers and succeed. The doctor is letting his guard down for someone once again. But when he sees her tears, they feel heavier on his heart than his own promises. How could he not help her? He picks a white flower and places it gently on the back of her hand, then kisses it. She's surprised by his actions. He thinks to himself that he only wanted to stop her from crying, but he didn't expect to feel so moved. Meanwhile, the king calls for one of his servants and tells him that he wants to visit the queen's chambers more often. The servant is surprised and asks, "More nights?" The king confirms, saying that he plans to visit the queen more regularly. He explains that a child is weak and fragile, and they must be carefully protected until it is born healthy and strong. He's glad his bloodline will continue, and now they need to make sure everything is in place for the child's future. He believes the queen will be the perfect mother for the heir. The king believes that a prince born from her would be far better than any son from the other woman. And if the other woman gives birth to a useless girl, everything will return to square one. He then asks why the servant is standing there, and the servant hesitates, saying he's worried that more visits might harm the queen's health. The king laughs, amused by this. He thinks to himself that the queen has become quite interesting lately, or maybe she's simply learned how to act like a woman worthy of being embraced. In fact, he wonders if the queen is the one who is most eager to become pregnant. The king smiles, thinking to himself that she's always been sensible and never neglected her duties. The doctor tells her to carve it into her heart, to succeed in making him hers. He is letting down his walls once again, but her tears weigh on his heart more than his own promises. How can he not help her? The queen blushes, wondering what this feeling is that's taking over her. Is it because he is unattainable that she feels this way? The doctor thinks to himself that he cannot even tell whose heartbeat belongs to whom anymore. He now understands what he is feeling, but is not sure if he can stop it. He kisses her, with the flower still between his lips. His heart races so fast it scares him. He pulls back slightly from the kiss and tells her that her movements should be slow, drawing him in. He removes the flower and kisses her again. She pulls away from the kiss, blushing and coughing awkwardly. She says it's the wind. He tells her that this is how it should be, Your Majesty. If he cannot resist his feelings, then he must hide them. Meanwhile, a man and woman talk. The woman says she has no idea what's going on in her father's head. The man replies that their lady servant suddenly became a distant cousin, and then left to work as a maid in the palace. Now, they say she's become a senior lady and is pregnant with the king's child. She must have moved fast after entering the palace. The woman speaking is Mistress Choi, Seo-kyung's aide. She says she's exhausted from playing along with this act, but she's good at making things happen. The man, thinking about it, says how lucky their family would be if that baby really is a prince. They eat color biscuits as they talk. The woman then says she shouldn't have punished her as much as she did. Seo suddenly thinks about the possibility of holding a grudge and wonders what might happen if she tries to get back at her. She gasps, thinking about how her brother used to fool around with her, and worries he might end up in trouble because of this. The man seems confused and asks which brother she means. She's surprised by his lack of awareness and wonders how he can be so clueless, explaining that she had fooled around with both of them, so she's asking which one might get into trouble. She then calls the woman a wicked little wench for sneaking around with both her sons. The man starts thinking to himself, recalling that he used to believe his father also visited her room. If his mother didn't know that both of his brothers visited her, she probably didn't know about his father either. He decides not to say anything more. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Mr. Choi, Mistress Choi's husband, thinks to himself about the situation. Seo tells him that she knows he's faking his pregnancy, and she warns him not to pretend like he's going to blackmail her. She tells him to take whatever he has and keep his mouth shut. Mr. Choi, confused, asks if this is all she's giving him to keep such a huge secret. Seo replies that she's only been a senior lady for a few weeks, so she doesn't have anything else. Mr. Choi acknowledges this, but asks her why she's acting so high and mighty. She clenches her hands in anger and demands to know why he's withholding the most valuable thing she has. He tells her that she's acting naive and reminds her that she's never been innocent, not even once in her life. He tells her that this is how she made the king fall for her. She questions what makes a king so special. If a man fools around with the king's mistress, doesn't that make him a king too? She asks him if he's crazy, pointing out that they are in a dangerous place. He replies that he'll help her pretend she had a miscarriage. She's shocked by his words. He continues, saying he'll make it look like the queen was responsible for her losing the king's child. They become intimate, and he asks if they can see each other more often. He tells her that instead of always worrying about whether he will reveal her secret, she should remember who helped her get to where she is now. She thinks to herself that he believes it was him. He's just a man who lusted after her. She's the one who saw the king secretly, and didn't miss the chance to become a palace maid. She made her own opportunities. Afterward, as he gets dressed and turns away from her, he calls her a wicked girl, saying he would have been executed for treason. He warns her that if he impregnates her and makes it seem like it's the king's child, it will be their downfall. He promises to contact her once their plan to blame the queen for her miscarriage is in place. She turns away, saying she only needs that. He agrees. She thinks to herself that all she has to do is get pregnant. Lady Eom smiles and claps her hands, saying how relieved she is. She praises the king, saying he is truly wise and principled. The queen thinks to herself that she is relieved, but she can't help feeling uneasy. Their nights together have become less frequent, now only once a month, and suddenly the king wants to increase his visits to 3 times a week. She fidgets, wondering if she can keep up with serving him that many times. She worries about angering both the king and her father. She wonders what the king is really thinking as he sits on his throne. She thinks that if she's not fit for this position, she'll make sure someone more suitable takes her place. The queen's mind races as she tells herself this is her only golden opportunity, and that her dignity and family's honor are on the line. Lady Eom, noticing the queen looking pale, calls out to her, asking if she should fetch a physician. The queen tells her it's nothing, just a dizzy spell. Lady Eom expresses her concern, saying she was worried the queen had fallen ill. The queen realizes this is her chance to conceive an heir, and being bedridden would be disastrous. She remembers the difficult path she's taken to get here, thinking back to her childhood, when her father would punish her or scold her if she didn't meet his expectations. Lady Eom walks through the courtyard, deep in thought. She finds it strange that no matter how skilled the royal physician is, he still can't detect a pulse after weeks of trying. She wonders how long this should take. Despite everything, Seo shows every other sign of being pregnant. She coughs and refuses food, saying it's not because of a lack of persimmons, but that she simply can't stomach it. Lady Eom begins to worry. Could Seo really be lying about being with the king's child? It doesn't seem likely, but then again, Seo is capable of doing something like that. Lady Eom remembers how she had to serve Seo during lunch, and how her behavior raised some suspicions. When lunch ended, Lady Eom had to leave the room, and Seo watches her go, thinking to herself that this is exactly what she needs to do, make Lady Eom suspicious of her. Meanwhile, the queen is in the bath, a lady helping her with her hair. The lady asks if the temperature is to her liking, and the queen says it's perfect. The lady continues combing the queen's hair and smiles, saying that the queen's hair is so sleek and smooth, almost like the manhwa of a purebred stallion. The queen repeats this, surprised, thinking to herself that no one has ever said that about her before. The servant panics, realizing her mistake, and quickly apologizes, explaining she didn't mean to offend. The queen tunes her out, lost in her own thoughts, remembering how she first met the servant. The maid, the one who defended her in front of that woman and was punished for it, works in the stables. The queen recognizes her by the way she speaks. The maid calls for her attention, saying, "Your Majesty." The queen smiles and says she's been wanting to thank her for a long time. She mentions that she's heard the maid suffered for standing up to the woman who is now a senior lady. The maid is surprised, asking if the queen remembers. The queen nods and says yes, her actions were very comforting, but she warns the maid that if something like that happens again, she should let the words go in one ear and out the other. The queen can't always step in to help, and sometimes patience and holding back is the best way to protect herself. The women turn to leave, but then the queen asks, "What is it?" Her eyes widen, and she thinks that sometimes, being patient can make others impatient. The king suddenly appears, and they both greet him. The queen wonders when he arrived and why he is here at this hour. He says he came to speak with her, and she flinches at his words. She lowers her head and says she is at his command, "My lord." After a moment of silence, she realizes that he hasn't said anything and wonders why. Her eyes widen in surprise when she sees that he has undressed. He casually says that it's good timing because he wanted to bathe too, so why not talk in the tub? He joins her in the bath, and the water overflows, spilling onto the floor. This is strange and unexpected, much different from their usual encounters. She says that it's all happening so suddenly, but she knows she can't protest. She must accept him and try to make him feel welcomed. He has never acted like this before, and she doesn't know how to react. The king tries to get close to her. After a while, the king looks at her and says that he thought she might be wet since she is sitting in the water, but she is as dry as the night they first met. He calls her his queen and says that he wants a prince born according to tradition, perfect and without flaw. He mentions that since the new senior lady is pregnant, it has proven that he is capable of planting his seed, but a child is weak. Simply being born into this world is a challenge, and growing strong and healthy is an even greater one. He tells her that even though she may be pregnant, it will be the end for her if she cannot fulfill her duty. He reminds her not to forget her responsibilities as the queen. Now that he knows he can expect good results from her, he says he will see her again later tonight, at their scheduled meeting. The whole situation is spiraling into chaos. The lady in question, who's apparently supposed to be pregnant, has everyone tiptoeing around her, whispering and speculating. The doctor's caught in the middle, trying not to say too much because, honestly, what can he say? She doesn't look obviously pregnant, but then again, she's pulling off the act so convincingly that even the doctor feels like he might be wrong. Still, no one's entirely buying it. The whispers grow louder, and the tension thickens. Meanwhile, she's strutting around like she owns the place, one hand on her belly like a dramatic heroine. Someone accidentally bumps into her, a court lady rushing by with something clutched in her hands. The court lady apologizes profusely, but the pregnant lady isn't having it. She makes a big fuss, asking what on earth could be so urgent. Then her sharp eyes land on the item in the court lady's hands. A cloth. For menstruation. Now she's doing mental gymnastics. Menstruation. For Senior Lady Park. Or is this for her? She pieces it together faster than anyone expects. If the supposed pregnant woman is asking for this, it can only mean one thing: she's not pregnant at all. The timing is too perfect. This is her chance to catch her red-handed. Without a second thought, she decides to follow the court lady. In the royal chambers, the tension is as thick as the air. He stares at her, annoyed, asking why she's just sitting there like she doesn't know what to do. Does she expect him to handle everything? He thought, by now, she'd show at least a hint of improvement, but no, it's the same clumsiness as before. She bows her head and apologizes, reminding him that he once told her, during a bath no less, to never forget her duties. She says she's determined to fulfill them completely, even if it means learning from him directly. In her mind, her teacher's voice echoes, "Don't be scared. Be bold. Be fearless." She takes a deep breath, trying to remember that she managed to please him last time. Well, kind of. It only happened once, but hey, once counts. She confesses her lack of skill and begs him to teach her. His patience snaps, and before she knows it, he's pulled her close, his voice low and commanding. He's determined to give her a lesson she won't forget. Things escalate fast, and she's caught off guard. She tries to keep up, but everything feels strange and overwhelming. Her thoughts race as she struggles to adjust, and every new sensation leaves her breathless and confused. At one point, she blurts out that it's too much, too deep, too warm, too everything. And yet, to her surprise, she finds herself enjoying it more than she expected, even though her mind feels like it's spiraling out of control. Just as the room heats up, a sudden shout from outside shatters the moment. Someone is calling for the king, saying Senior Lady Park is bleeding heavily. The urgency in the voice pulls them apart, and the mood is instantly replaced with dread. She's furious, muttering that it's that troublemaking wench who deserves punishment, not her. But when they arrive, Senior Lady Park is in distress, claiming injustice. How can a woman who was never pregnant to begin with suddenly have a miscarriage? The king listens in silence, his expression unreadable. The accused lady tries to defend herself, swearing she's innocent. She insists she didn't even touch her, but before she can finish, the king silences her with a single glare. He says it doesn't matter whose words fly the fastest, what matters is uncovering the truth. The room falls silent as he declares the matter will be investigated thoroughly. No one dares to breathe as they await his next move. Lady Park tries to keep her calm, but the situation is getting messier by the second. She tells the king not to worry too much, though even she can't make sense of it. A miscarriage? Really? The whole thing reeks of suspicion. First, all the whispers and odd behavior, and now this dramatic turn. She's tangled up in something far bigger than she expected, and it's starting to feel like a storm that might sweep them all away. Still, she reminds the king that Lady Eom, as the highest-ranking court lady, is no easy person to deal with. The investigation will naturally fall to the Inspector General of the palace, which should make things smoother. After all, Lady Eom outranks her, so the Inspector General won't dare to push too hard. That's how these things usually go. But even as she says it, she knows this isn't a normal situation. This isn't just about Lady Eom. It's about that cunning wench, who has somehow managed to stay in the king's good graces. That changes everything. Favoritism in the palace always does. She can't predict how this will play out, and the uncertainty gnaws at her. She prays things don't spiral further, but deep down, she knows it's wishful thinking. Suddenly, a loud scream cuts through the air, and a palace maid rushes in, breathless and panicked, shouting for the king. Another maid scolds her for barging in without decorum, demanding to know what all the fuss is about. But the news she delivers is too shocking to ignore. The king has declared that he will personally interrogate Lady Eom, and has ordered her imprisonment. The room falls silent as the weight of her words sinks in. Imprisoned. That's as good as declaring her guilty, before the investigation even starts. This is unheard of, an outrageous move that breaks all protocol. Lady Park's mind races. Lady Eom isn't just any court lady. She's the highest-ranking one and her closest ally. Punishing her in this way isn't just about Lady Eom, it's a direct threat to her own position. The pressure is closing in from all sides. She knows she needs to act quickly. Her first thought is to involve her father. He'll understand the gravity of the situation and know how to help. But this is a palace battle, and battles here are won not by truth, but by the loudest, most persistent voices. No, her father is her best hope. If he realizes how desperate things have become, he'll surely step in. She resolves to send him a letter immediately, her hands trembling as she considers the consequences if she fails. The palace is like quicksand, and she can feel herself sinking. By the fourth day of Lady Eom's imprisonment, the tension in the palace feels like it could snap at any moment. The queen sits across from her father, who is clearly losing patience. He shakes his head, calling the whole situation ridiculous. How could even her most trusted aide become such a problem? The queen defends Lady Eom, insisting that she has suffered an injustice. But her father cuts her off, asking if she really called him here to plead for that woman. He leans back, his tone sharp, telling her to go to the king herself if she's so concerned. Better yet, she should claim that she's pregnant too. Why not? Apparently, lying about pregnancy is all the rage in the palace these days. He even admits he admires the wench for her cunning, if only she were on their side. That kind of boldness would be useful. But now, the queen should know better than to drag him into this mess. He warns her what will happen if he tries to intervene. People will start whispering, saying the childless queen was consumed by jealousy and ordered her aide to harm the king's favorite. And once that rumor starts, it doesn't matter if it's true. People believe what they want to believe. He looks at her, voice cold, and says he'd have no choice but to recommend severe punishment for Lady Eom himself, just to protect their positions. It's the only way. He adds a jab about how she's been in this role for years, yet still manages to be so useless. Unlike others, the queen's title hasn't elevated her, it's simply exposed her flaws. The queen feels the weight of his words, heavier than ever. She doesn't respond, but they linger in her mind like a bitter echo. Later, her maid brings food, urging her to eat something, even if it's just a few bites. But she weighs it away, the guilt eating at her more than any meal could help. She whispers to herself that she's failed again, failed the king, her father, everyone. There was a time, long ago, when she used to hope for her father's approval, used to think she might earn praise. But she learned quickly that nothing she did would ever be enough for him. Now, even the king's anger feels like her own fault, a punishment for her inability to meet the impossible expectations placed on her. She can't let Lady Eom pay for her failures. Determined, she asks her maid to find out where Lady Eom is being held. She can't just sit here and do nothing. After some time, she sneaks out to see her. It doesn't matter how dangerous it is or what people might say. Lady Eom has served her faithfully, and she won't let her suffer alone. Lady Eom is basically freaking out, asking the king why he's risking everything by coming to see her in person, especially since someone might spot him. She's going on and on about how worried she is about her health, what with the cold weather and all, and how she's just not built for this whole prison thing. She's apologizing left and right for being such a klutz and getting herself into this mess. Meanwhile, the king is trying to reassure her, telling her he's got her back and will get her out of there ASAP. He's even giving her a fancy cloth to keep her warm, which is pretty sweet of him. Lady Eom is all about the gratitude, saying it's an honor to serve him and all that jazz. But at the same time, she's also super aware of the king's wrath, and how he's basically furious with her. She's thinking to herself, okay, I get it, he's mad, but did he have to punish me like this, making me stand around for ages in front of all his ministers? She's wondering if it's because of the whole miscarriage thing, or if he's just straight up done with her. The king is calling it a day, and his people are all, thanks, dude, we appreciate it. But then things take a turn, when the king starts grilling this other lady, asking her why she masterminded some secret plot. She's all, what are you even talking about? And he's like, don't play dumb, I know all about it. She's trying to defend herself, saying it was all a big misunderstanding, but the king is having none of it. He's telling her to scram, and she's trying to beg for mercy, but he's not having it. She's all, he's so angry, he won't even listen to me. The queen's maid is asking her what took so long with the king, and if he's finally going to free Lady Eom. The queen is saying the king's anger is deeper than she thought, and that is still reeling from the loss of their unborn child. She's trying to explain that the king was really counting on having a prince, and that this whole thing has him majorly troubled. The maid is trying to offer some words of comfort, saying that maybe if the queen gets pregnant again, it'll help ease the king's grief. But the queen is having none of it, and she's basically yelling at the maid, calling her a clueless fool. The maid is trying to defend herself, saying that she was just trying to help, and that sometimes having someone new around can help heal old wounds. The king is checking in on the queen, noticing that she's looking a bit pale and worn out. He's asking her if she's okay, and if she's been suffering too much. He's trying to be all sympathetic and understanding. Someone else is discussing the whole situation with a friend, saying that they heard the queen was responsible for the miscarriage. But the friend is defending the queen, saying that's not true, and that it was actually the queen's aide who caused the whole mess. The friend is explaining that the aide is currently in prison, getting punished for what she did. The friend is also saying that the queen is only human, and that it's natural for her to feel jealous sometimes. The friend is asking if there's anything they can do to help, and the person is saying they need to learn some new things. They are saying that's the best they can do for now, and that they are trying to move forward. Her tutor is asking her if she really thinks learning new things will solve all her problems, and she's getting a bit of a reality check. He's pointing out that she's always been a bit of a follower, doing what she's told without questioning it, and that's not exactly the most empowering way to live. He's saying she needs to take control of her own life, especially when it comes to her relationships, and not just let others dictate what she does. He's asking her if she's going to keep playing it safe or if she's going to start making some changes, like maybe taking a little trip outside the palace. She's saying that's actually a great idea, and that she's got a chance to visit the king's grandmother, who's been recovering from an illness. Apparently, the royal family likes to get out of the palace when they're feeling under the weather, and they've got a sweet setup at a rehab center near some hot springs. She's stoked to be going on this trip, and not just because she gets to get out of the palace. She's actually really concerned about the people who live in the area, and she wants to see firsthand how they're doing after the summer floods. She's worried they might not have enough supplies to make it through the winter, and she wants to help. Her tutor is looking at her, and he's thinking to himself, wow, she's really something special. He's impressed by how much she cares about the people, and he's thinking that she's going to make an amazing queen one day. He's asking her if she's got any other plans in the works, and she's apologizing for getting a bit carried away with her excitement. He's saying that talking about the people's well-being is actually a great thing, and that he's really impressed by her dedication to her role. She's thinking to herself that she just got a major compliment, and she's feeling a bit shy about it. But at the same time, she's also thinking that she's got to step up her game and learn as much as she can from her teacher. He's taking off his shirt and telling her that it's time to get hands-on practice. He's explaining that she needs to learn how to touch him in a way that's gentle and caring. He's showing her exactly where to touch him, and how to do it in a way that's soothing. He's telling her to pay attention and learn, because this is important for her to know. She's taking it all in, and she's thinking to herself that she needs to practice as much as she can. She's touching his neck and asking if she's doing it right. He's holding her hands and looking into her eyes, telling her to just trust herself and go with the flow. He's saying that this is just a test to see how much she's learned, and that she should just relax and focus. As she's touching his body, he's commenting on how gentle and careful she is, and how it's actually kind of nice. She's thinking to herself that she's not sure if she's doing it right, but she's trying her best. She's bending down to continue learning, and he's guiding her hand. She's feeling a bit curious about the differences between men's and women's bodies. She's also thinking about the upcoming trip to visit the king's grandmother and feeling excited. She's asking him questions, but is telling her to focus on the lesson. She's feeling a bit bad, like she's overstepped, and apologizes. He's thinking that things have gotten a bit awkward between them. They're getting ready to head out on their trip, and she's thanking everyone for their hard work. It's clear that she's a kind and respectful person, always trying to do the right thing. He's thinking to himself that there are definitely some unclear things about this whole situation. He's wondering if it's possible that Seo-kyung lied, but is quickly dismissing that idea, saying she's not the type to do something like that. He knows he's got to make a decision, though. They've finished discussing their trip to visit his grandmother, and now it's time to talk about Lady Eom. He's saying that he plans to banish her from the palace, and the queen is totally freaking out, screaming banish her. She's saying that Lady Eom has spent her whole life in the palace, and she can't just let her be kicked out. He's telling her that he thinks it's a fair punishment, especially since the woman who claimed to be carrying his child is now in a tough spot. The queen is talking to herself, saying that he still believes that woman was really pregnant, and that is being totally blind to the truth. She's thinking that Lady Eom is going to suffer if she doesn't do something. The queen is saying that she'll do what the king wants, but she's asking if they can at least give Lady Eom a small house of her own as a kind of compensation for her years of service. The king is thinking to himself that Lady Eom probably has plenty of money stashed away from her time in the palace, but is telling the queen that she can do what she wants. He's saying that since Lady Eom used to serve his grandmother, he'll give her one last gift. The queen is thanking him for his generosity, and she's going to see Lady Eom to give her the news. She's telling Lady Eom that this is all she could do for her, and she's giving her a package with the deed to the house the king gave her, plus some of her own jewelry. She's hoping it will help Lady Eom out. She's thinking to herself that the queen trusted her until the very end, and that she didn't say anything mean to her. She believes that things started to go wrong when that other woman got close to the king. She's determined to repay the queen's kindness someday. Right now, the whole palace is buzzing with activity as they get ready for the king's trip. She's decided that she needs to go on this trip too, no matter what. She's super excited to get out of the palace and see new things. The day of departure has finally arrived, and everyone is ready to go. The king is checking in with his team to make sure everything is in place. Meanwhile, the queen is noticing that a certain someone is trying to tag along on the trip. She's thinking to herself, how did she even find out about the trip? This woman is determined to stick close to the king, and the queen is not happy about it. As they arrive at their destination, they are greeted by a friendly face who's offering them a place to stay. The king is thanking him for his kindness and hospitality. The queen is also expressing her gratitude, saying that she won't forget his kindness. Their host is welcoming them to his home and saying it's an honor to serve them. She's wondering why they had to come to this particular place, and she's worried that someone might see her and cause trouble. She's refusing to go into a certain house, saying it's full of bad memories. Meanwhile, the king and queen are in their room, and they're talking about how they appear to be just like any other couple. They're discussing how their positions in life brought them together, and the queen is saying that fate has a way of bringing people together. The king is feeling good about the state of their people, saying they seem happy and well off. But the queen is expressing some concerns, saying she thinks this winter might be tough on them. She's lost in thought, and the king is asking her what's on her mind. She's saying she's worried about the people who are struggling, and that they need to pay attention to those who are faring worse. She's pointing out that some of the villagers looked thin and pale, and that they need to make sure everyone is doing okay. The king is showing some insight, but the queen is also thinking that he's not always the most perceptive person. She's comparing him to his rival, saying that the other guy has a natural talent for understanding people. The king is getting a bit tired of talking about their people's problems, though. She's apologizing for being too chatty, and not noticing the king's fatigue. She's thinking to herself that she's gotten too used to her teacher listening to her and praising her, and that she needs to be more considerate of the king's feelings. The king is saying that it's late and they should go to bed, and she's deciding to try and help him relax. She's telling him a story from her childhood about how brushing your hair can help soothe a weary mind. He's skeptical, but he's willing to give it a try. As she's brushing his hair, he's joking that she should try to brush away all his troubles. She's saying that she'll do her best, and he's teasing her about being able to solve all his problems. Meanwhile, Elsewhere in the kingdom, a woman is trudging through the snow, grumbling to herself about being stranded. She's remembering how she used to sneak around with a guy named Yangu, and she's hoping that no one found out about their adventures. As she opens the door to take a peek, she's shocked to see Yangu standing there without a shirt on. He's asking her if she's in a hurry, and she's clearly surprised to see him. She's asking him why he doesn't want her to hurry, and he's just standing there with Master Choi's daughter. She's furious, asking him how he could be with another woman so soon after they were together. She's saying that the other woman made her life miserable, and she can't believe he's betraying her like this. The lady is telling him to stop standing around and get on with it, and she's being pretty crude about it. He's trying to defend himself, saying that she's the one who rejected him. She's saying that he's doing well for himself, and that he seems happy with his new partner. But he's dragging her close, trying to seduce her, saying that he's not doing well without her. He's being pretty forward, licking her neck and asking if she misses him. He's holding himself and saying that one part of him really misses her. She's pushing him away, asking him what he's doing. He's teasing her, saying he's going to take a stab at winning her back. She's hitting him, saying he thinks he's forgotten that she's above him and he'll always be below her. She's saying that she's not the same person she used to be, and that he can't just touch her whenever he wants. He's joking that she's still putting on airs, and that she's still chasing her dreams of palace life. In the morning, the king is thanking everyone for their hospitality, saying they had a great night's rest. The hotel owner is thrilled to have the king and queen staying at his place, and he's grateful for the opportunity to repay the king's kindness. He's thinking to himself that it's amazing how things turned out, and that one of his relatives is now a palace maid with a chance to become queen. He's clearly got big ambitions for his family. The king is visiting his grandma, and he's asking her how she's doing. She's saying that she's been doing well, thanks to his thoughtful gestures. He's apologizing for not visiting more often, but she's telling him not to worry. She's praising the queen for taking good care of her, and sending her delicious food and seasonal greetings. The king is surprised, asking when all this happened, and why the queen never mentioned it to him. The grandma is changing the subject, saying that she's heard the king has promoted a palace maid to a senior position. She's teasing him about being arrogant, and saying that he should focus on more important things. The queen is jumping to his defense, saying that it's all a misunderstanding. The grandma is telling the king that he needs to spend more time with the queen, and that he should understand what she's getting at. The king is apologizing for causing concern, and saying that they'll let her rest. She's telling them to enjoy the hot springs together, and to take some time to relax. They're getting ready to leave his grandmother's room, and she's telling them to enjoy the hot springs together. The queen is saying they'll keep that in mind, and the king is thanking her for her concern. But is thinking to himself that his grandmother still treats him like a prince, and that she's being pretty harsh on Seo-kyung. He's realizing that Seo-kyung is going to get mistreated when he's not around to protect her. The queen is asking him what's wrong, and he's trying to brush it off. But she's telling him that as the ruler, he needs to keep his feelings hidden. He's getting defensive, and she's saying that she's just trying to help him be a better king. She's pointing out that he's been doing a great job taking care of the people, but that his grandmother doesn't seem to know about it. She's saying that maybe she didn't do a good enough job spreading the word about his accomplishments. His grandmother is speaking up, saying that she's worried about the queen always putting others first. She's saying that she was just upset that the king was so obvious in his feelings for Seo-kyung, but she's letting it go for now, and warning him that she'll be keeping an eye on him. The king is deciding to retreat for now, but is thinking that he needs to come up with a plan to protect Seo-kyung from his grandmother's wrath. He's worried that Seo-kyung is too weak to defend herself, especially after losing the baby. The queen is warning him to be careful on the slippery floor, and he's taking his leave. She's telling him to slow down, and she's fuming about the way his grandmother spoke to her. She's thinking that she'll show her who's useless in the end. Meanwhile, he's enjoying the hot springs, saying they're nicer than he expected. He's feeling relaxed, and she's offering to help him bathe. He's teasing her, asking what if he doesn't want her help. She's sneezing and complaining about the ridiculous gown she's wearing, saying it's see-through. He's telling her to get in the water before she catches a cold. As they are in the water together, their bodies are touching, and she's feeling a bit mortified. He's noticing that she's usually so composed, but she has her moments of awkwardness. He's thinking that she's not really his type, and that she's not very good at being a woman. He's comparing her to Seo-kyung, thinking that he can't wait to see her again. He's been avoiding her to give her time to grieve, but he's missing her. The queen is holding on to him, saying she's cold, and asking him to warm her up. She's saying that she wants to conceive during this visit, and that she's willing to do whatever it takes. She's asking him to touch her, and she's putting his hand on her chest. She's saying that she needs him to touch her, and that she's willing to do whatever it takes to get pregnant. He's getting aroused, and she's telling him to put it in her. She's saying that she's feeling desperate, and that she needs to act on it. He's teasing the queen, saying he can't refuse her request, especially since she's been begging him. He's getting intimate with her, and she's screaming in pain. He's telling her to be quiet, reminding her that they are outside. She's trying to endure the pain, but she's also feeling a strange sensation that's making her arch her back. She's wondering if this is what it feels like to long for someone. He's saying he's almost done, and she's telling him to make sure he finishes. She's thinking about how great it would be to have a child with him, a future crown prince or princess. He's thinking about Seo-kyung, and how he can't wait to be with her again. He's saying to himself that no matter who he's with, the only woman he can picture is Seo-kyung. The queen is talking to the king's grandmother, saying that she's worried about her safety. She's thinking that the ice on the floor was suspicious, and that someone might have intentionally tried to hurt her. She's asking for an investigation, but the king is saying that she's just shaken up and needs to rest. The queen is offering to take care of the king's grandmother until they leave. They're discussing how often they visit the king's grandmother, and the queen is saying they should fulfill their familial obligations. The king is agreeing, but is thinking to himself that he's not really looking forward to spending time with the queen. He's feeling suffocated by her do-gooder attitude and her constant talk of duty and law. Just then, someone appears at the door, and the king is shocked to see Seo-kyung standing there. He's asking her what she's doing there, and he's wondering if he's seeing things. He's been missing her so much, and now she's right in front of him. He's noticing that she's wearing thin layers, and he's telling her to come closer. But Seo-kyung is saying that she's only a sinner who couldn't protect their child. She's telling the king that she can't stay by his side anymore, and that she's going to accompany their child to heaven. The king is confused and upset, asking her what she means. He's realizing that she's planning to take her own life, and he's dragging her back, refusing to let her go. Seo-kyung is begging him to let her go, but the king is holding on tight. He's crying, and Seo-kyung is telling him not to cry. She's saying that his tears are making her heart weep, and she's begging him to stop. The king is overcome with emotion, and is holding on to Seo-kyung for dear life. Seo-kyung is saying that she's in a vile door, because she failed to conceive the royal seed, and that she should be punished. But the king is holding her back, refusing to let her go. He's asking her why she's so insistent on leaving, and she's saying that she's not fit to serve him yet. He's telling her to embrace him, but she's pushing him away. The king is saying that he'll keep her safe, even if he has to make her a consort. But Seo-kyung is saying that he mustn't do that. The king is drunk on a philter, and can't stop himself, and is telling Seo-kyung to bear his child safely. She's promising to do so, and the king is holding her close. Meanwhile, the queen is up all night, and her maid is worried that she'll fall ill. The queen is saying that she's fine, just a bit worried about her duties, but the maid is noticing that she's not her usual self, and is offering to call a physician. The queen is saying that she's just feeling a bit cramped from sitting for too long, and that she'll go for a walk to clear her head. The maid is discussing the queen's recent slip and fall on a patch of ice, and wondering if it was intentional. But the queen is saying that she can't comprehend the situation, and that she's been out of the palace for too long to understand the politics at play. She's exploring a new place and wondering if it's always been here. She's asking if it's a storage room, and if she's allowed to go inside. She's curious about a decorative screen, covered in cloth, and admiring a beautiful painting of flowers. She's feeling the artist's pain and loneliness, and wishing she could comfort them. The king's grandmother appears, and they're chatting about the painting. The queen is getting emotional, and the grandmother is asking if she's crying. The queen is saying that the painting reminds her of someone she misses. They're discussing the artist's seal, and the queen is realizing that it looks like her teacher's seal. They're walking outside, and the queen is asking if the king's grandmother is fully healed. She's thanking her for taking care of her and inviting her to breakfast. But then she sees the king standing next to a palanquin, and she's wondering what's going on. The king is explaining that he's accompanying Senior Lady Park back to the palace with care. The queen is surprised to see Senior Lady Park, and asking what she's doing there. The king's grandmother is also curious, asking who Senior Lady Park is. The king is wondering what's going on, asking his grandmother and the queen what they are doing outside. But his grandmother is ignoring him, instead asking who Senior Lady Park is. The queen is explaining that she doesn't know, and that the king didn't include her on the list of personnel for the trip. The king's grandmother is getting upset, telling Senior Lady Park to leave and demanding to know why she was allowed to come without revealing herself. The king is trying to calm her down, explaining that Senior Lady Park wasn't trying to run away, but his grandmother is having none of it, saying that she won't forget the insult. The queen is getting frustrated, kneeling down to cry and saying that no matter how hard she tries, she's always in the king's shadow. The king is trying to comfort her, telling her to go inside where it's warm. But she's refusing, saying that she won't leave until she gets some answers. The king is getting exasperated, saying that the queen is being stubborn and getting on his nerves. He's trying to reason with her, but she's not listening. The situation is getting more and more tense, with no resolution in sight. She's visiting her teacher, bringing a gift to express her good wishes. Her teacher is saying she looks worn out, probably from the long journey to the hot springs. She's apologizing for worrying him, but is saying she's often on his mind. He's explaining that he can't bear to see anything he cares about fall into distress, whether it's a person or one of his drawings. She's finding his words surprising, and she's almost misunderstanding him, but she's realizing that he's just showing his concern for her as his student. He's thinking to himself that she already has a lot on her plate, and he doesn't want to add to her burdens by revealing his true feelings. He's brought a goat to her room, intending to drop it off with the palace chef. But she's asking him to leave it with her for now, saying it's too young. He's realizing he made a mistake by bringing it to her room, and he's worried about what she might think. She's asking if he's heard rumors about her health, and he's explaining that he was worried about her. She's saying that the king hasn't requested her presence yet, but she thinks he will soon. She's wishing that the king could change his ways and regard her differently, but she's thinking it's probably because of her own shortcomings. She's saying that sometimes he says things that take her by surprise, and she's grateful for his concern. He's saying that he can't help but be concerned about her, and he's always thinking about her well-being. The rumors about her health reached all the way to him, and he's relieved to see that she's doing okay. She's smiling, feeling a bit better knowing that someone cares about her. She's thinking that if only she had been able to give the king a baby, these rumors about her position might not be spreading. But she knows she's not the one who started them. It's all because of the king's obsession with another woman, without caring about the consequences. Just then, the goat runs out with something in its mouth, and she's laughing, asking someone to catch it. He's curious, asking what the goat has, and she's explaining that she did some embroidery work for the king, wishing him good health and well-being. He's teasing her, asking under what lucky star the king was born, and she's playfully handing him another embroidered piece, saying she thought of him while working on it. She's a bit embarrassed, saying it's her first time and it turned out ridiculous, but he's saying it's perfect, that it means her tiger was the first, and he's satisfied with that. They are both laughing, and the goat is nibbling on the king's stockings, refusing to let go. They are having a great time, and someone is peeking from the door, hearing their laughter and wondering what's going on. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 4. Don't forget to subscribe and ensure to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time.